What happens when the truth you have been quietly carrying finally becomes too heavy to hold alone? What if the most courageous thing a person can do is look someone they love directly in the eyes and refuse to accept another lie? Rachel waited.
I know this is hard for you.
She waited through the
Please,
whole of the
just hear me
following
out.
morning,
We can
through
work through this
David's
together.
coffee and his casual conversation and his
This is
easy
so
kiss on her
lovely.
cheek before he left for
I'm
work.
so glad we could do
She waited
this.
through the long and silent afternoon. And then she called Megan Hale directly. She had found the number through the company
What? Are
directory.
you serious?
A simple
Yes,
search.
it's confirmed.
The kind that takes
can't
less
believe
than
this.
3
How?
minutes when your
I'll
hands are
explain
steady
later.
enough to type. The phone rang twice. Hello. Rachel kept her voice calm. My name is Rachel, she said. I am David's wife.
This is
and I think we
absolutely
need to talk.
wonderful. Indeed,
The
it
silence
is a great
on the
success.
other end lasted long
We
enough
must
to
break in.
confirm everything Rachel had already suspected. Megan's voice, when it returned, was quieter than before. He
have
told
some
me you
bad
two were
news.
separated,
What is it?
Megan said
There's
finally.
been an accident.
Is everyone okay?
And there it was. Not a crack this time. A collapse. Rachel sat with those 7 words for a long moment, letting them settle fully into her understanding, feeling the specific weight of what they meant. David had not simply lied about a meeting. He had constructed an entirely different version of his life and handed it to someone else to believe in. Rachel thanked Megan. She ended the call. She sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet bedroom and pressed both hands over her face. Then she stood up. When David came home that evening, Rachel was already seated at the kitchen table. No candles this time. No good plates. Just the overhead light and 2 chairs, and the truth sitting between them like a third person neither of them had invited. David saw her expression the moment he stepped through the door. Rachel. Sit down, she said. Her voice did not shake. He sat. She told him everything she knew, the timeline, the photograph, the phone call with Megan, all of it laid out in careful and honest order. David's face moved through something she had never seen on him before. Not anger, not denial. Something closer to relief. And that, somehow, was the most painful part of all. Because it meant he had been exhausted by the weight of it too. And he had chosen to keep carrying it anyway, rather than simply tell her the truth. Part 5. The Decision. What happens when love is no longer enough to hold 2 people together? What if walking away from something broken is not giving up, but finally choosing yourself? David talked for a long time that night. He explained, and apologized, and explained again. He said the relationship with Megan had lasted 4 months. He said it had ended 3 weeks ago. He said he had been trying to find the right moment to tell Rachel the truth. Rachel listened to all of it. She listened the way she had always listened, carefully and fully and without interruption. And when he finished, she sat quietly for a moment and looked at the man across the table. She looked at the lines around his eyes, and the familiar shape of his hands and the blue button-down he was still wearing from that morning. She had loved this person with everything she had. That part was completely and undeniably true. But love, she was learning in real time, is not the same thing as a reason to stay. She thought about the woman she had been just 2 nights ago, setting the table with the good plates and the tall white candles, believing that small and careful acts of love were enough to hold a marriage together. She had been pouring herself into something that had already been quietly leaking for months. I need you to leave tonight, she said. Her voice was soft. It did not waver. David looked at her for a long moment. He nodded slowly. He packed a bag without argument, which told Rachel that somewhere beneath his apologies, he had already known this moment was coming. The front door closed behind him at 9:30, and Rachel sat alone in the home they had shared for 6 years and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not devastation. Not emptiness. something closer to stillness. She blew out the last candle she had forgotten on the counter. And in that quiet, darkened kitchen, she made herself a simple and honest promise. She would not rebuild her life around someone else's comfort ever again. She would not shrink her instincts to protect another person's secrets. She would not confuse loyalty with silence. The dinner had been simple. The lie had been small. But what they had revealed together was something enormous. The truth that a relationship built on anything less than complete honesty is not a relationship at all. It is a performance. And Rachel was done performing. 3 lessons this story teaches us. Lesson 1. Small lies are never truly small. David's habit of bending the truth for convenience grew quietly over time until it became something capable of destroying everything around it. What we learn is that dishonesty does not stay contained. It spreads into every corner of a relationship until there is nowhere left that trust can stand. Lesson 2. Ignoring your instincts is a choice. Rachel noticed small things for months: the tilted phone screen, the quickly ended call, the name she filed away and forgot, the story she never questioned. What we learn is that our instincts speak early and clearly, and the most dangerous thing we can do is train ourselves to silence them to keep the peace. Lesson 3. Self-respect is not selfishness. The hardest moment in this story is not the confrontation. It is the decision Rachel makes afterward, to leave something she genuinely loved because she loved herself more. What we learn is that walking away from something broken is not failure. It is the first honest act of someone finally choosing their own dignity over their own fear. What if one quiet dinner was all it took to unravel 6 years of a marriage? What happens when the person sitting right across from you, smiling and warm and completely at ease, is hiding something you never expected to find? That was exactly the night Rachel found herself living. She had spent the entire afternoon in that kitchen, roasting chicken with rosemary and garlic, setting the table with the good plates and the tall white candles, folding the napkins the way she had seen in a magazine once. It was supposed to be romantic. It was supposed to be simple. Rachel smoothed her dress one last time and looked at the table with a quiet kind of pride. She had always believed that love lived in the small things: a meal made with care, a candle lit at the right moment, a table set just for 2 people who still chose each other. David walked through the front door at exactly 7 in the evening. He was wearing his blue button-down, the one Rachel had bought for their 3rd anniversary, and his hair was slightly damp from the cool evening air outside. "Hey, you!" he said, tossing his keys onto the side table by the door. Rachel turned from the counter and smiled. "I made your favorite," she said softly. David crossed the room and pulled her close, both arms wrapping around her waist, and Rachel leaned into him, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of his cologne. "You did not have to do all this," he murmured into her hair. "I wanted to," she replied. There was something undeniably beautiful about that moment, the candlelight catching the warmth in his eyes, and for one breath, Rachel felt everything in the world go perfectly quiet and perfectly right. They sat down together and the dinner began exactly as she had imagined. Easy words and warm food and the gentle sounds of a Tuesday night inside their little suburban home. David talked about his week, a project deadline, a colleague named Tom who kept missing important meetings. Rachel listened and laughed and reached over to refill both their glasses. And then he said it. He mentioned a Thursday afternoon meeting held at the downtown office, casually, the way someone mentions weather or traffic. Rachel passed him the bread. And then something deep inside her went completely still. Because she remembered Thursday. She remembered it with perfect and unsettling clarity. David had called her at 6 that same evening, from what he described as a conference being held across the city, a conference that was supposed to run well into the night. So how had he also been at the downtown office that same afternoon? Rachel kept her smile perfectly in place. But behind those warm brown eyes, something was already shifting, something quiet and cold and impossible to ignore. A small crack had just formed in the very foundation of everything she had ever trusted. And she had not even asked a single question yet. What happens when you catch someone in a lie, but they have no idea you already know the truth? What if the most dangerous thing in the room is not the secret itself, but the smile hiding behind it? Rachel took a slow sip of her wine. She kept her eyes gentle and her voice even, and her hands perfectly steady on the table in front of her. Inside her chest, something was pulling apart at a seam she had never even noticed was there. "So the meeting ran late then," she said lightly. David nodded without hesitation. "Way too late," he said, cutting into his chicken. "Tom presented for almost 2 hours straight. You know how he gets." Rachel laughed with him. But her mind was already somewhere else entirely, moving backward through every detail of that Thursday. The phone call at 6, his tired voice on the other end, the noise of what he had described as a hotel conference room filling the background. She had believed every single word without question. That was the part that sat the heaviest in her chest right now. Not the lie itself, but how effortlessly she had believed it. She reached for the breadbasket and studied his face without appearing to study it at all, a skill she had never known she possessed until this exact moment. David looked completely at ease. He looked like a man who had nothing in the world to hide. And that was somehow the most unsettling thing of all. After dinner, Rachel cleared the plates while David settled onto the couch with his phone. She stood at the kitchen sink with the water running and her hands submerged in warm soap and her thoughts circling back and back and back. She thought about the past several months. Small things she had filed away and forgotten. A weekend trip he had taken alone for what he called a team retreat. A late phone call he had ended quickly when she entered the room. A name she had seen only once on his screen before he tilted it away. The name had been Megan. Rachel had not thought about it again until this moment. Now it sat in the center of her memory like something lit from below. She turned off the faucet. Ugh. She dried her hands slowly. And then she walked to the living room doorway and leaned against the frame and looked at the man she had loved for 6 years. "David," she said softly, "do you know anyone named Megan?" The pause that followed lasted less than 2 seconds. But Rachel felt every single one of them. "Megan," he repeated, his eyes staying on his phone just a breath too long before looking up. "From work, maybe. Why?" Rachel smiled. "No reason," she said quietly. "Just a name I heard somewhere." She turned and walked back toward the hallway. And her heart was hammering so hard inside her ribs, she was certain he could hear it from across the room. Part 3. The Search. What happens when a single name unlocks every door you were never supposed to open? What if the answers you desperately need are already sitting inside your own home, waiting to be found? Rachel did not sleep that night. She lay beside David in the dark and listened to his breathing settle into the slow and steady rhythm of someone completely unbothered. And she stared at the ceiling until the bedroom filled with the gray light of early morning. At 4 in the morning, she slipped out of bed. She wrapped herself in the old cardigan hanging behind the bathroom door and carried her phone into the kitchen. She sat at the same table where they had shared dinner only hours earlier, the candles now cold and the plates washed, and the whole evening looking from the outside like nothing at all had happened. She opened her phone. She told herself she was not doing anything wrong. She told herself she was simply trying to understand. She typed the name into the search bar, Megan, and paired it with the name of David's company. The results were immediate. A professional profile appeared on the very first page. Megan Hale, Senior Events Coordinator, and the company name listed was the same one where David had worked for 4 years. Rachel stared at the photograph. She was striking. warm eyes and dark hair, and a smile that looked effortlessly confident. Rachel set the phone face down on the table. She pressed both palms flat against the wood and breathed. Then she picked it up again. She searched further, deeper, the way you search when part of you already suspects what you are going to find, but another part of you is still praying to be wrong. And then she found it. A photograph from an industry event, dated 8 weeks ago, on a Saturday that David had told Rachel he was spending with his brother across town. In the photograph, David was standing beside Megan Hale. They were not touching. They were not doing anything that could be called proof of anything at all. But the way he was leaning toward her, the angle of his shoulders, the particular quality of his smile, Rachel recognized that smile. She had seen it aimed at herself once. A long time ago. She closed the application and placed the phone gently on the table. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a bird had started somewhere in the dark yard. And Rachel sat alone in the pale morning light with the terrible and clarifying feeling that the life she had been living and the life that had actually been happening were two entirely different things. She thought about Megan's confident smile. She thought about David's effortless lie. And she thought about herself, sitting at a beautifully set table, passing the bread, laughing at the right moments, completely unaware. She got up and filled a glass of water. And she made a decision. She was going to find out everything. Not because she wanted to destroy what they had built, but because she finally understood that you cannot protect something real by pretending the damage is not there.